Only 6 months ago, the world was still turning. There were cars on the road and planes in the sky. Life was normal. Bernard was a firefighter in the small town of Rosewood and had always dedicated himself to the town and its community. He put his life on the line many times to help people and was always the first one to run into a burning building. It wasn't about bravery. It was his duty to protect people, and he took it very seriously. Only 6 months ago, it was midsummer. The air was dry and hot. There was no training for what came on that day. The emergency lines started ringing and didn't stop. People all over the town were reporting sickness. Some people wrote it off as a simple stomach bug at first, but the sickness only got worse. And there was only a few people in the fire station that didn't get sick. How can a few people help an entire town when no one even knows what is happening? It became obvious that this was something bigger than a simple sickness when the sounds of heavy military convoys started making their way through the city. Airplanes and choppers would fly overhead constantly. They told emergency services nothing other than to avoid contact with the sick. Bernard's orders were to ignore people who needed help and stay away from them, and that was harder than anything he had ever done. Running toward danger to save someone was natural for him. Staying still when someone needed help was not. How do you fight an invisible enemy? You can't fight an unknown sickness with a water hose and basic medical training. When it all happened 6 months ago, most people looked for ways to save themselves. The desire for survival can hijack a person and strip them of their humanity. Panic and confusion affected everyone, even the ones that weren't sick. The hospitals filled up quickly, but no treatments would lower the burning fever that was developing in everybody. It took about 3 days for the sick to begin to die. Then they woke up. Being a part of emergency services, Bernard had been in direct contact with the hospital. There was only one doctor left. He was badly bitten and had barricaded himself in his office. Bernard didn't know how to sit with this. He couldn't save anyone, and now it was too late to even try. Then, one by one, the hospital and other stations he was in contact with around the county stopped responding. Nobody knows why they all woke up. There is only theories: bad hamburgers, biblical reasons, chemical testing, radiation from space. None of that mattered. The reasons were irrelevant. The sickness was punishing the ones who resisted it by plunging them into an eternal nightmare. Bernard will never forget his first experience with the ones that woke up. A group of them attacked him outside the fire department. He got lucky. He was able to get away with just a scratch and armed himself with one of the axes. Cutting those people down was the worst thing he ever had to do. The crushing sounds haunted him for weeks. They weren't who they used to be. They would look at you through dead eyes as they tried to rip you apart with their teeth. It was like the sickness sent them to completely destroy anyone left who resisted it. One bite was all it took, and you were one of them in 3 days. Bernard had seen it many times. But that was 6 months ago, and he's been alone for a long time now. He used to use his axe to break down doors to save people. Now, he uses it to break people. The ones that woke up must have begun to flow out of the hospitals and cities. Their numbers were now overwhelming, sometimes chopping down literally hundreds in a single day. Bernard had scavenged almost every inch of the city. He had food, weapons, entertainment, and secured the second floor of the fire hall. He had water barrels and dispensers. The sickness couldn't get him, no matter how hard it tried. That was all he had now. His defiance of it became his motivation to survive as long as possible. However, there are many days in a month, and many ways inside of each one of those days for something to occur. That day came like a sucker punch for Bernard. While he was outside the station working on his truck, one of them came up behind him. He was able to kill it, but it was too late. It had sunk its teeth in, and he was bitten. Everything he was working toward was over. The truck didn't even matter now. In 3 days he was dead anyways. Bernard climbed back up to his safety on the second floor. What now? He thought. 6 months of fighting, building, scavenging, learning. It was all for nothing, because of one moment. One single mistake. He had taken several cases of booze from the local bar and saved them for a special occasion. This was special enough. That night, he drank until he passed out, and when he woke up, he was sick and nauseous. It was beginning. He didn't have much time now, maybe a couple days. Despair set in. Then it was quickly extinguished. Looking down at the dozens of empty bottles, he got an idea. He used to fight fire. Now he was going to work with it. If he was going to go out, he was going out on his own terms and taking as many with him as he can. It took a little time, but he was finally ready. The sickness finally had him, its claws ripping away his mind. It was time to end it. He hit the siren on his truck and readied himself. Then he saw them, crowds of them heading straight toward him. He lit the field up with a Molotov cocktail. He had soaked it in fuel. His generator wouldn't need it now. It was an amazing fire. The crowds ignited immediately. Their old, tattered clothing helped the flames spread. The field was filled with traps and ditches to slow them down and help the fire grow. Then they got to him. He chopped and hacked, and more kept dropping. The sirens kept bringing them. Eventually, the traps were all gone, and his axe was about to break. He had one last surprise for the sickness, though. He rigged a propane tank. The propane tank exploded, gloriously. In the aftermath, there was nothing left. Bernard was gone. Everything was burned away. His lifetime fight with fire had ended with him joining its side to fight a larger threat. His final sacrifice had taken out hundreds. Now, if anyone was left, at least they would have less of them to fight. 6 months ago, the world was still turning. There were cars on the road and planes in the sky. Life was normal, and Bernard was still a firefighter. But that was 6 months ago. I want to take a quick second and thank each and every one of you who have supported me so far. You are all glorious, and your support means the absolute world to me. Cheers.